My integration process is designed to eliminate a lot of those problems because hiring executives just don't think that senior level people need to be integrated. Look at the background of this person. They're ready-made. They don't want to be managed. They don't want to be given guidance. They don't want to be told what their expectations are. They just want a little high level, this is your mission, go to it. If you have a problem, come see me. You know, my phone's always here, call me. You know, they don't integrate them. And yet the statistics clearly show, as you mentioned earlier in our program, that a huge number of people fail. And the reason that they fail is because of what they did or did not do in the first 90 days.
It's a continuous growth pattern over a period of time that lends itself to you understanding how to lead. That's absolutely critical for people to understand. Whether you're 22, 32, 42, 52, 62, whatever it might be, of leadership, you have to be able to constantly, consistently be growing, developing how you navigate.
Good afternoon, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dylan. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. So, to our audience, today's guest has spent more than 2 decades doing the one thing that organizations say they care about, but rarely invest properly in, and that's leadership. He's led people in the military, shaped executives in the corporate world, advised founders at inflection points, and interviewed hundreds of senior leaders across the industries. He's seen who rises, who stalls, and who quietly derails entire operations, often without even realizing it. So what makes this conversation different is that Michael doesn't just coach leaders, he hires them, he integrates them. And when they fail, he understands exactly why. So this isn't just a conversation about theory, it's about pattern recognition, and the hard way over the last couple of decades or so. So if you're a founder, an executive, or someone stepping into leadership, wondering why what got you here suddenly isn't enough, this episode is for you. So stay tuned all the way through. Michael Burroughs, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Tell us how it all started.
Oh, well, long story. I'll make it short. I went into the Army out of college. I was an Army officer. That was going to be my career. It ended up being my career, but I left active duty after 12 years and entered the private sector. I stayed in the Army Reserve, so I kept my military career going, but I really wanted a private sector career. I started in the Fortune 200. I was an organization development executive for 3 different companies. Learned a lot in each one. You know, I took a lot of what I did in the military and applied it in the private sector. I had been the head of leadership and ethics at the Army Academy of Health Sciences, so that prepared me to do that kind of work in the private sector, and I've been doing that ever since. After I left the organization development roles, I became an entrepreneur, and I started doing executive recruiting back, in the year 2000. I've been doing it since 26 years. I've been at that. And then I branched into executive coaching, which I had done as an organization development executive. One of my chief roles as OD executive was to coach the executive team. And I really enjoyed that kind of work, and I was well prepared for it. And after losing 3 jobs because the companies either relocated out of the state or sold off my division or anything but performance problems with me or my division, I didn't want to relocate. I had gotten out of the Army to quit following my job, put some roots down for my family. So I decided to stay in St. Louis, where I live, and start a consulting career, which I was able to do financially because I'd done well as an executive, and my kids were grown. My wife was working as a teacher, and I said, okay, I'm going to make a run at it. And that's when I entered I was an organization development consultant private for several months, and then I got hired by a top 5 executive recruiting firm and grew in that for 12 years. I ended up being the managing director of a regional office for that firm. My practice was global in scope. I worked in several industries. I had a good team. I enjoyed the work immensely. And then I kept coaching on the side because of my firm had no problem with my being an executive coach in my in my private time because it actually brought search clients to the firm. So I've been coaching almost as long as I've been recruiting.
Wow.
And one of the things that I did when I was an OD executive was we had so much turnover in the executive ranks in one of the companies that I worked for that I figured as the change management guy in the company, I had to find a process to solve that problem. And I did. And years later, I wrote a book about it. And that book is called Before Onboarding, How to Integrate New Leaders for Quick and Sustained Results. And basically another branch of my three-legged stool career was born, and that was integrating executives. I was recruiting them, coaching them, and integrating them because my process was designed to ensure that they got off to a quick start and that they sustained their early successes long term. Because the research clearly showed that anywhere from 30 to 50%, Dylan, depending on who did the study, of executives hired from the outside fail. And they fail typically within 18 months. And within 2 years, most of them are actually gone from the organization. And failure is a little bit broad term here. It really means they're not measuring up. It doesn't mean that they got fired necessarily. But a lot of them quit. A lot of them get into a job, and after 2 or 3 months, they're off to a bad start. They know it. They're not happy. And after a year or so, they just move on. Another recruiter comes along, puts them somewhere else. And then that cycle of disenchantment continues for them when they move into another job, often. And which is what my book and my process of leader integration is supposed to curtail.
When you look at your book and
that's-
what you've written in your book and you look back, which chapter shaped how you now define leadership the most, and why? And you know, is that sort of central to what your book is about?
Yeah, it's all about leadership. I mean, one of the things that I learned in the military was that we were oriented toward leadership. And one of the big disappointments when I got out of the military was that the private sector is more oriented toward management. And that was a big aha moment for me, because I just assumed that those principles just carried over from the military to the private sector. Let me give you an example. When I taught leadership in the Army at one of these schools, there were 4 pillars of leadership. A leader is a teacher, a counselor, a coach, and a manager. Now you think about that. If leadership is an influencing process, you influence people, and management is a controlling process, you control resources, then 3/4 of a military officer's job is influencing. Teacher, counselor, coach. Only 25% of that job was management. Now when I got into the private sector, I saw that basically reversed. In fact, more so. I would say 85% of the perceived role of the executives that I coach and recruit and place and integrate see their job as management. They're trained that way. They go to graduate school, get MBA programs that emphasize management. I taught leadership in an MBA program as an adjunct professor. There was one leadership course in that program. I taught it, and it was an elective. Wasn't even required. So, I don't know what every other MBA program is like out there, but I do know my younger son, went to an Ivy League MBA program, and he said leadership was really de-emphasized there as well. It's business is all about management. It's about controlling time and money and resources. And one of the things that bothered me in the private sector was the very term human resources. Now, I spent 2 years as an HR director in a corporation, as kind of a side job that I had, and I never liked the term, because I never looked at humans as resources. I look at humans as people, and so just it's a subtle message that's being sent that people are like interchangeable. You move them around and you don't really influence them. You use them, and frankly, a lot of the people that I coach and recruit and integrate were trained that way. Their whole professional development has been oriented towards being good managers, and good managers are important.
So you're very clear that leadership and management are not the same thing.
They are not the same
Right,
thing.
so in simple terms, what's the difference, and why do so many organizations confuse the two?
Okay, well, the definition that I like came from, I think, leadership, a writer named Warren Bennis. He coined the phrase that leadership is an influencing process, and you influence people, and communication is the medium for influencing people. And so, how you communicate, nonverbal, verbal, your character, the credibility of what you have to say, all of those things influence people. Everybody likes to follow a good leader. We naturally warm up to a good leader. I mean, they inspire us. I mean, we all can say that at one time in our lives. But, management, on the other hand, according to Warren Bennis, was a controlling process. You control resources, and that's absolutely essential, for a person in a management / leadership role. But what has happened is that people consider the terms leader and manager as synonymous. You hear people refer, you're my boss, you're my leader, you're my manager. Well, you may be the boss, but that doesn't necessarily make you a leader. Nor will it necessarily make you a manager. You might be a great leader, but not a particularly effective manager. So, the terms are different, and organizations reward good management. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about getting results. Frankly, the people that run the companies, and I've been in that group, are rewarded for performance of the business. And people often in many of the organizations I've worked with, and I've worked with a couple of hundred easily, they pay lip service to the people. And that's getting more and more the case, with every passing year to me. It's not that they don't care about people, they just pay lip service to it. The real emphasis is on managing, making money, and the people are often an afterthought. And that when I'm working as a coach, I'm usually shoring up the leadership deficit that these people have. I'm saying, well, they got where they got because they were effective managers, typically. But where they're running into trouble, as they define it to me, I don't go fix people. I work with successful people who then tell me where their shortfalls are, and often they tell me, I really need to be a better leader, and I know that's now required in my job, and I don't know how to do it. So help me with that.
So what I'm hearing from what you said, like communication is the medium of leadership. Mm-hmm. So then, when someone comes to you and says, "I'm not a very good leader, I need to up my game in the leadership space," versus being an effective manager, what do you teach them? Well,
self-awareness. That's the first lesson they have to learn. I mean, they instinctively know they need to improve in that area. So my job is to then dissect the problem and find out exactly where they need to improve and how they need to improve. And my improvement process is targeted to where that need happens to be. They may be an incredibly effective public speaker, but they may not be credible in a small group environment when they're talking to their team, because the team, they may not be communicating authenticity and things of that nature. So one of the ways I get to that is I do, and this is a common coaching practice, I do what's called a 360 assessment. I like to do them verbally and not give somebody some kind of survey to fill out. I talk to the key people that the executive tells me I need to talk to. These are people that really know me, and a good coach, good coachee that I'm working with will be pretty thick-skinned and will send me to people who would probably be critical of that person. And I find out what do these people want to see more of them and less of them as leaders. I mean, that's basically it. Do more of this and less of that. And so I gather all of that feedback, and I come back to the person I'm coaching, and I'm saying, here's what your team had to say. Here's what your boss had to say. If I talk to the boss, here's what some of your peers had to say, and certainly some key members of your team, if not all of them, had to say. And now they've got a snapshot, a very clear snapshot of where their shortfalls are. And then we attack them. We go after them, whatever they happen to be that we need to work on.
So in your coaching, you sort of lead leaders to confront an honest snapshot of how others experience them.
Yeah.
Right? So why is self-awareness so uncomfortable yet so essential?
Well, I think a lot of that is ego driven. You know, I mean, we have some very tough sounding but fragile senior people in the private and public sectors. You know, who when they're criticized, they're just fragile. They can't take the criticism. Wow. You know, they had there's a phrase I've heard years ago called being a legend in your own mind. You know, I mean, they believe that they're basically flawless, and please don't disrupt my opinion of myself. You know, but the people I love working with are the ones that say, look, I really want to be successful. I want to be the CEO of this company or a company somewhere, and I know I need to be better at interpersonal savvy and other things that are very influencing skills, or I'm not going to get there. And maybe a good mentor or somebody they had along the way pointed that out to them, and said, "Look, you're gonna plateau if you don't fix this." And those are the people I really enjoy recruiting, and they're the people I enjoy working with as a coach because they get it. And then now we're partners in their development. You know, Dylan, people that I work with are finished with going to college or graduate school. You know, they got their formal education, and they get other training. They may go to an executive management program somewhere for a couple of weeks, and it broadens their knowledge and so forth. But it has been proven time and again that the best way to develop an executive is with a coach, an executive coach, one-on-one, behind closed doors, private one-on-one conversations where they're very open and candid with me, and I'm open and candid with them, and we work to improve them. My coaching engagements go for a year. You know, I don't walk in and say, well, in 60 days we'll have this all fixed. You know, because they may actually make improvements in what they do, but they don't have an opportunity to manifest that improvement immediately. It may take 3 or 4 months before they have 2 or 3 opportunities to exercise something that they've learned in the process of working with me as a coach.
Which is fair. I mean, it takes time for the process to step by step over a period of time. You need to consistently, make those changes. It doesn't just happen overnight, right? So I think that's
true.
Absolutely critical for people to get their heads around it. Nothing is overnight. Nothing is like magical. It takes a bit of hard graft consistently over a period of time to affect those changes. So what's the hardest feedback leaders struggle to hear about themselves in your time that you've been coaching people?
That people don't trust them. That they don't trust them. That is a javelin in the chest for a lot of people, because they're shocked in many cases, and in some cases they feel like, oh, I've been discovered. I mean, I've been trying to hide this, and I'm not. They see right through me. And so, when I'm doing my integration process, one of the first things my whole integration process begins before the new leader even shows up for work. The book is called Before Onboarding. I do all my work ahead of time. And it pretty much culminates on the morning of the first day when I have a team meeting with the new leader that's been hired and the team. I've interviewed every single person on that team and given the new leader feedback on what they had to say before that individual shows up. And I asked the team, the people I work with love this, as I said, give me one question you want that new leader to answer in front of you and all of your peers, and they'll never know you asked the question. Every question will be anonymous. And they're going to stand up in that meeting the morning of their first day and answer every one of those questions. And they're tough questions. They're tough questions, and I tell the new leader, you have one opportunity today to make the right impression with these people. If they don't trust you by lunchtime, you're going to spend months and months and months trying to get honest information from them because they don't know what they can tell you and what they can't tell you. But by the time they answer all of those tough questions, you can see the body language change in the room as people say, oh, I like that. I like the way he or she answered that question. And, oh, I think, that was tough. I don't know how I would have answered that question, and I like the way they did. So trust starts to get developed. When it's not developed, then communication breaks down, because communication is the medium of leadership. And if your team's not communicating with you, or your peers are not communicating with you because they don't trust you, then you're just marginally effective at best, and probably not destined for success in that role.
That's a tough one for people to hear for sure. But I mean, deep down inside, people know, don't they? Surely that, they might not want to admit it, but intuitively, that people around you don't like you, don't trust you, don't. That there's an elephant in the room, or do they not? Are they completely oblivious? Are they? Is it truly oblivious?
Well, that's
or is it a case of they just don't like to hear it?
all the above. Some people in management / leadership positions in organizations got where they got not by being remotely concerned about any of that. And they like being tough. They like being feared. They like being, all of those things. And that's a difficult person for me to coach, frankly. If they are in love with their toughness, and they think that that's the key to their success, then we don't really have a lot to work with.
I can't imagine those types of people would come to you or anyone for coaching because they think they've got it all right, right?
No, let's keep in mind a lot of the people I coach have been assigned to me to coach. I offer my services to an organization as a coach, and then they tell me, well, I would like for you to work with Sally, and I'd like for you to work with Joe, and then so tell me a little about them, and then I get the feedback from my client. Where do you think they need to be shored up? What's your long range plan for that person? And then I go into my initial meeting with that individual who their boss, has told them, I'm bringing in a coach, here, and I want that coach to work with you. If they feel like that that I'm being assigned to fix them, it doesn't work so well. If they are told, and credibly told, that I'm there to make them better, to prepare them for future advancement, and in addition to making them better in the role that they're in, then that's a gift. They look at it as, wow, well, thank you. You're investing in me. And then, so their whole attitude changes, and I'm a pretty credible person one-on-one anyway, so they trust me, and everything's private, whatever's said between us stays between us, and we're off to a year-long good start.
There's a level of buy-in that the person needs to come to the table with, right? If their boss goes to them and says, I want you to get coaching and we're going to pay for it, regardless of whether, it's been paid for, is there a level of, this person's got to want to be coached in the first instance?
Yeah, oh yeah. And don't misunderstand me. I do have a lot of clients that pay me out of pocket to coach them. That they engage me personally to do that. And frankly, they're my best ones, because they know they want it, right. They need it, and they're willing to pay for it.
They've already bought into the process, right? Which is very different from being told by your boss, I want you to get coached, right? So
yeah, but even if how your boss tells you he or she wants you to get coached is part of the leadership message. How are they communicating to you that they want you to get coached? I mean, if it's to fix you, then they get defensive. It's like, well, what's the matter? I mean, you've never told me this before. Why? And then all of a sudden it becomes a confrontation. If it is packaged truthfully as an opportunity, then I get great results with these people, because they see it as my organization's investing in me, and I like that.
Yeah, no.
It's all, we're humans. We react. We all have the same thin skin, whether we think we do or not.
Yeah, no, for sure, without a doubt. And I think you're absolutely spot on. It's how it's communicated. It's how it's framed,
everything.
Right?
Communication is the medium of leadership. It will make or break you.
Amazing. I love that. I love that a lot. So, I mean, you work with both as an executive coach, as you've outlined, and as an executive recruiter. So
yes.
What do founders that you've worked with, organizations, consistently misunderstand when they make their first senior hires?
Well, they're typically very inexperienced at doing it. Okay, so I don't go in with any assumptions that they know what I'm about to do for them. So I have to kind of gauge their level of sophistication when it comes to the whole hiring process in general. If they make a mistake, and they all do to some degree or another, it's building their new hire on the basis of a resume and how that individual interviewed with them. There's a concept out there called the halo effect. Have you heard this term, the halo effect? It's a lot of times interviewers, and I see this all over the place. In interviewing a person, they zero in on something about that individual that they like. That's maybe a lot about them, and then all of a sudden, the hour-long interview that they have ends up being maybe 10 minutes of substance, and the rest of it is feel-good conversation. If I could teach hiring executives one thing, it would be how to interview, properly interview, a candidate. And so it's my job as a recruiter to do a lot of that work for them, most of that work for them. And I have all kinds of tools that I do so that I give them information that they probably would not get themselves in the process, just to make sure they get the information. For example, any executive that I recruit, I go to the hiring manager and some of the other people and I say, what are some questions you want this individual to answer in writing before you will ever even speak to them? And I said, you don't have to answer that now. Just, by Thursday, give me your questions, And then I have some of my own based on the position specification that we put together. And then I put together a questionnaire. And when I get down to my short list of candidates, from 100 down to 10 and from 10 down to 5, then I have them fill out that questionnaire and answer the questions. And all of those questions I make sure are oriented toward not what you would do in the future, but how have you handled this particular problem in the past? Because past behavior is the best indication of future behavior. So let me give you an example. Let's say one of their competencies that they really want taken care of in this job is conflict management. Let's say there's all kinds of conflict in that organization, and we got to have a leader come in here who can deal with all this conflict and pull these people together as a team. So conflict management, big deal. So I will ask in my questionnaire, and I'm paraphrasing here, tell me about a time when you had a big conflict in your organization that you personally, not delegated it, but you personally had to resolve it. What was the situation? How did you deal with it? What was the outcome? Now that's a story. They're telling me a story. And then I asked them a fourth question that my clients absolutely love, and that's, what did you learn from the process? What did you learn from the process? Because I had an executive one time that told me, well, I had this situation and I did this, and here was a problem, I did this, and how did it turn out? Terribly. It was a disaster. Now this is a person who wants me to place them, see, and he's confessing that he did something that was a big problem. And I said, so what did you learn from the process? To which he outlined everything that he should have learned from the process, and every other time he was faced with that situation, he did it perfectly. I like that, because one thing, I trust that individual. This is a credible executive I'm dealing with who knows him or herself if they can confess that sort of thing. And you better believe I tell my clients that. I emphasize that. And everybody learns from their mistakes. I mean, we learn more from our mistakes than our successes. And so, I go to my client with that questionnaire, and I present the candidates in my own words, and they have their resume and such. But I said, don't make a decision on whom you want to interview, certainly not who you want to hire, until you've thoroughly gone over this information. And then when they interview them, and usually at that level there's several people interviewing the candidate, they've got a roadmap for their interview. They know exactly what they want to focus on. They know exactly what this person has done in the past that is relevant to what that person needs to do in the future. Not what they think they're going to do or what they say they're going to do, but what they've done that would prepare them to do that. And that's what new owners and people like that have no idea usually about any of that. So a huge part of my job as an executive recruiter is to manage my client, to influence my client. I don't go in there and just take whatever it is they want. They're paying me a princely sum to do this work, and if I feel there's a deficit in their ability to hire the right person, I'm going to shore up that deficit. And usually they respond quite nicely when I do.
How do you help someone recruiting or interviewing someone test the candidate for what they're like under pressure?
Well, we have assessment tools that we use now. They're very common in the last 10 years for really reputable executive search firms, and ours is one of those, to have behavioral psychologists come in and do assessments on the finalists, to address just that sort of thing. How adaptable are they to change? How do they deal with pressure? There's probably a dozen categories that they're evaluated on, and the results are very, very informative, and they're very reliable. And so that just gets folded into the presentation of the candidates when we're able to say that type of information. This is how they operate. Because most organizations at that level want to know that the person they're hiring can function under pressure. Because it's a pressure cooker at that level for everybody.
Yeah, no.
And that's how we do it. That's the best way to do it, rather than just trust our own judgment, although I do have opinions on all of that, and I do check references about that. I still want to know what the behavioral scientists have to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's absolutely crucial. I think it's a very in the moment process as well, right? I mean, obviously you do all your background work and you found out all that, you do the whole filtering process on a candidate's questions, answers, etc. But ultimately, it's assessing in the moment, in the interview process, in situ, how a candidate's performing on their questions, what you're really sensing and reading between the lines on what a person is. Almost you want to listen to what's not being said in the questions, right? Because there's so much standardization out there on responses. It's really, does this person engage with this dialogue in context of the role that they are applying for, and are they demonstrating the skill sets that we can take to be able to teach, coach, guide, and help them apply themselves in a real way into the organization that they're coming into, right?
Yeah, one of the things that gets people derailed, that is a surprise, and again, the research is maybe 20 years old that demonstrates this, is not a demonstrated weakness in their role when they come on board. It's overdone strengths that they rely on at the exclusion of things they should be doing. And that's usually a bad habit learned from a previous job. This is what got me ahead in my other job. Now I'm going to make sure I double down on that in this job, because I have confidence in my ability to do that particular thing, and it becomes overused. And a lot of times when you dissect why an executive failed, it was every bit as much due to overdone strengths as it was to demonstrated weaknesses. My integration process is designed to eliminate a lot of those problems, because hiring executives just don't think that senior level people need to be integrated. They don't. They think, well, good grief, look at the background of this person. They're ready-made. They're going to turn them loose. They don't want to be managed. They don't want to be given guidance. They don't want to be told what their expectations are. They just want a little high-level, this is your mission, go to it. If you have a problem, come see me. My phone's always here, call me. They don't integrate them. And yet the statistics clearly show, as you mentioned earlier in our program, that a huge number of people fail. And the reason that they fail is because of what they did or did not do in the first 90 days. And the research clearly backs that up. It takes 6.2 months for a new executive to start returning value in the organization. That's under the best of circumstances, 6.2 months. It's called the break-even point. Up until then, they've been consuming value in their organization. At 6.2 months, now they start to begin to return value. Well, that's a long time to wait. And one of the common, pieces of feedback that I get from my clients when I'm recruiting someone, when I check on the individual that I placed down the road, especially if they did not integrate them, which is most of the time, is, so how is this person doing? And they said, oh, it was a great hire. We really, happy that we hired this person, but we expected more sooner. We're not getting what we really had hoped to get by now, and then of course, my book is the roadmap for how to fix that. But it's that, well, you didn't give this person any real expectations about what you want them to get done in 30, 60, and 90 days. What are the must-haves? And moreover, what must they not do under any circumstances? I ask that question of the boss, of the peers, and of the direct reports. I want everybody to tell me, what should this person never do,
So
under any
what you're
circumstance.
saying is most hiring leaders or hiring people or hiring managers haven't set out the KPIs for the person that they're hiring, and so in their head they have an expectation, but they haven't actually communicated that expectation to the person that they've hired. And so when the person who's hired is doing their job, going about their day to day, and in a month, 2 months, 3 months, they haven't met the expectation that's in the hiring manager's head, then the hiring manager all of a sudden becomes disappointed. Well, they're going to be disappointed because they haven't communicated or voiced or mapped out or had the conversation to say, I want these deliverables 1 month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, 4 months in, 5 months in. That's on the hiring manager, not on the person that's being hired.
That's right, and it's rare for a hiring manager to do that. Rare. KPIs are becoming more and more important, but at the higher the level, the more general the KPIs are, and the more the management team at that level wants to turn loose the new executive to basically do his or her own thing in their own way to the best of their abilities because they got all this talent. And KPIs, frankly, tend to be very management driven. They're not leadership KPIs, they're typically management KPIs. So it also reinforces with that new leader that's coming in, this new manager, that, well, I got to get results. Here are all the results I've got to get. And my bonus is tied to those results. And my career here is tied to those results. And so they subconsciously, if not consciously, emphasize getting things done, not the people that get the things done. And that's where the leadership deficits begin. That's a good setting for that problem. They know where their rewards are.
It's a disease amongst leaders and amongst leadership within many corporations.
No, actually, I'm going to stop you on that. You're using the same term, leader. That's a problem with leadership in organizations. Those people aren't leaders.
Correct.
They're people who are in charge.
Roles. They put in those roles.
Yeah, it's the person who's in charge. That doesn't mean that person is a leader. That just means that person is in charge. And they don't establish those standards. And my feeling from experience, 20 some odd years of doing this, is most of the time their orientation toward that new leader is management. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as they balance it out with leadership. And they rarely do. Rarely do.
So, but what I'm hearing,
unless they're a leader
what I'm
themselves.
hearing from what you're saying is you're saying that the definitions between the two just are not properly understood.
Most of the places I go, if you pin them down and say, give me a definition of them, they'll find something that kind of works, a workable definition for each. But it's usually an aha moment for them. They kind of also think they're synonymous. Well, sometimes I'm a leader and sometimes I'm a manager. And I would say, well, that's not what your people say. What your people say is you're a manager 100% of the time. And you're not a leader at all. And they'd like to see more of that. Remember the questions I asked, what do you want to see more of out of this individual and less of out of this individual? And I bring that feedback back when I'm coaching people, back to and they say, well, what they want to see more of out of you is leadership, and they define it exactly what that would look like, and then they want to see less of the management, which is an overdone strength for a lot of these people. And once they are aware of that, that's a whole self-awareness thing I was telling you about earlier. Then they can decide, well, do I really want to adjust? At this stage, at 52 years of age, am I too old to learn new tricks? Is it really important that I do that? And the people I love working with, now I'm putting on my coaching hat, are people who really want to do it. They really want to, grow. I mean, I'm an amateur philosopher, and there's a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus, and he's known for promoting the idea that everything's in a state of flux. Nothing is static; it's always moving. And he had this phrase that you can't put your foot into the same river twice. That everything is becoming. And one of my problems when I'm coaching people is they think they have arrived, and that they're not becoming. Once they've believed that, well, I don't need to become anymore, I'm here. I put my foot in the same river every time. Well, no, you don't. You can't put your foot in the same river twice. So once they get the idea that I am always growing, and if I'm not growing, I'm dying. They say that about their organizations all the time. If we're not growing, we're dying. Well, say that about yourself, as an executive, because it's no less true. And so the ones I love to recruit and the ones I love to coach are the people who get that. And they really do want to continue to become what they need to be. And that's an ever-changing process. I mean, the world's changing rapidly. They have to adapt. But the one thing that's constant is leadership. Management will change. AI, for example, AI is a management tool, a powerful tool, and it's changing the way organizations work tremendously. But leadership's every bit as important as before. If I have a concern about AI, it's that for some executives, it's making them even less effective as leaders because it has a negative impact often on the people that work for them. Their careers, let's say, the jobs that they have and so forth. So they've got to understand the human element of any management process or change that's being made in the organization. So, they need to understand that. Everything that's happening to me right now, if I'm going to continue to grow as an executive, I've got to develop. I've got to continue to develop. And the best way to do that is with a very effective executive coach, working one-on-one with them,
And that also comes down to people buying into the fact that they need that. In the first instance, they've got to think that they need that in the first place. Otherwise, it becomes a very arduous process, right? Or it doesn't even happen. And but
it doesn't happen.
People understanding that it's a continuous growth pattern over a period of time that lends itself to you understanding how to lead. That's absolutely critical for people to understand, whether you're 22, 32, 42, 52, 62, whatever it might be. If you're in a position of leadership, you have to be able to consistently be growing, developing, how you navigate, right? Especially as you brought up the subject with AI coming into organizations, and we haven't even touched the sides on AI actually impacting organizations. It's being used at a very, very surface level, so far as I'm concerned. Not so far as I'm concerned, but in real terms, it hasn't been properly deployed at all. We haven't even touched.
I'm continuing to grow. I mean, I'm 75 years old and I'm growing all the time. And
75 years
one of the things
so you're actively, so you brought the subject of AI up. You're actively using it now, not as a gimmick, but as something thinking, but as a thinking productivity tool. Like, what's changed your perspective from sort of, I don't know, curiosity or maybe being on the sides at one point to actual conviction in AI in your space?
You're gonna love this answer, I bet. The older we get, Dylan, the more time is your most valuable resource. Because you reach a point in your maturity that you realize you're on the downhill side of life. And so every minute counts, every hour counts, every day counts. And if I'm wasting time doing my work because I don't have the right tools or the right skills, this is where AI has been a blessing to me, because it has saved me lots of time and it has made me more effective. In anything from writing a white paper, and I'm an English major in college. I'm a good writer. I've written a couple of books, but still, I have found AI to be very helpful to me, even in composing. information, and it saves me time. Okay, helps me organize, and you know, and so I personally benefited from it because I'm an independent producer. You know, one of the things I would like to do as a one of my dreams would be to go into organizations that are implementing AI and help them not lose sight of the leadership needs in their organization because of it. You know, I could see that being a really fun kind of work for me, and one that would really be beneficial to the organization is to be the AI leadership consultant. You know, I mean, how can we make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're implementing these great tools in your organization, and that leadership doesn't take a hit?
So if there was an AI version of you that could guide new leaders long after you step back, which is going to be a long while, you've still got many more years left in you, for sure, what principles would you most want to protect and teach?
You mean if AI were replacing me
No, if
in the
you
role?
had a version of you that would complement what you do, because nothing will replace the human experience. Nothing will replace Michael Burroughs in situ, one-on-one. Nothing.
Well, I
You
could
can't always
could,
be there 24/7.
yeah. Yeah,
And,
well,
and so
you know, you're asking me
when
to,
you're not there, what principles would you teach your AI to specifically respond with in terms of principles that you would want to protect as a sort of foundational framework that would, you know, speak like you?
well, I would like to see AI, and it could easily do this. Well, not easily, but it technically could do this, to tailor a person's development that they would get from me as a coach, that's tailored to their individual needs. And that AI would extract information from, you know, YouTube videos or, you know, master classes or things that are very oriented toward that individual's needs. This assumes the individual wants to take the time to grow. And then let that do that work for me instead of my having to sit in front of them and do my best job I can do of conveying that information. AI can cherry pick all kinds of really good developmental episodes for the people that are being developed, and I think it could be, you know, it could be designed to do that.
For sure,
And
without a doubt.
I'd be very happy if it were doing that. It would only make my job more effective as a coach.
Well, you know, certainly a custom bespoke AI persona of Michael Burroughs could be done. That's what I do. So if you ever wanted to explore that, we can do that. But looking across the 25 years of leadership, as we wrap up here, of leadership, of coaching and hiring, what advice would you give someone early in their career who wants to lead well, not just rise fast?
Your people will make or break you. Your people will make or break you.
I love that.
And if they're going to break you, it's just a matter of time before they do it. You know, so develop the necessary skills and values, probably values more important than skills, to focus on the people that are making you successful. I mean, as an Army officer, that was the rule, you know. I mean, you know, one of the things I liked about being a company commander, for example, is my role was to groom my replacement. You don't run into that in the private sector very often. They talk about, you know, succession planning and all that stuff, but that's you know, I've not had a lot of luck with succession plans in the, you know,
People are
in my
scared.
work.
People are scared about losing their jobs, right? They don't.
Well, yeah, but in the military, you know, it's a whole lot different. I would look around at my company of 180 people, and I'd say, if I got knocked out tomorrow, you're in charge. Now, if I am keeping all of this skills to myself because of my ego, because I'm the commanding officer, then I'm hurting my organization. Because if something happens to me, you are immediately in charge. And if something happens to you, the next person is immediately in charge. And one of the things that made the American Army very strong is we have a whole lot of leaders in the Army who are willing to step up when other people have been, you know, taken out. And they don't wait to be told what to do. They just do something, you know. I mean, we're an independent bunch over here in the United States, And I like that. I like being able to get my officers together and say, look, I'm going to put you in charge of something you don't think you're ready for. And I'm going to coach you because I'm a teacher, counselor, and coach. And because you might be doing my job an hour from now.
Wow.
And that value was instilled
That's
in me
huge.
as a 21-year-old second lieutenant.
Huge, sir.
You
That's
know.
huge.
And it stayed with me all the way through being a colonel.
Wow.
That value never goes away. In the private sector, if your people will make or break you. And it's not just the worker bees down there. It's the people that's your management team. They'll make or break you. So groom them. You end up in an auto accident and you're laid up for 4 months. One of those people is going to be running your organization. Are they ready? How much of your job is it to see to it that they are ready? I would love to see that value instilled in a new person growing up in wanting to be a leader and run an organization somewhere, to start that value right in your first supervisory role that you have and take it right through to the top.
Just some phenomenal words of wisdom there, Michael. Absolutely fantastic. And so finally, what's one truth about leadership that if more people accepted it earlier would save organizations years of pain?
Organizations what?
Years of pain. If it was understood earlier, what's one thing that could help save organizations a lot of trouble?
Integrate the new leaders. Integrate the new leaders. That's my whole passion in life right now at this stage of my career, is to proliferate the awareness of the need for new leader integration and to actually do it. And the process in my book is a tailor-made process for doing it, but I've done case studies on a dozen companies that have done it a little differently. And I do workshops on that to say, look at how everybody does it. Do it. Just commit to do it. Understand you need it and commit to do it. And then your leaders will have quick and sustained results. And if I could get one thing across to the world and organizations that really want to keep growing and be successful, it's integrate every leader you bring in. Not only the ones you hire from the outside, but the ones you promote from within. Because they're entering a new job. They may be in the same company, but they're entering a new job. They have some of the same challenges. And frankly, a lot of them don't succeed as well. The numbers are lower. They tend to make it better than an outside hire. But they fail too, and it's because they're not integrated into their new role. They got promoted. Back in '69, there was a book called The Peter Principle that was written. You may have heard of it. And basically the crux of the Peter Principle is that everybody gets promoted to their level of incompetence. We will rise to the point to where we don't know what we're doing anymore. And as though that's going to be the place where you stop. Well, your career plateaued at that point. No, it's much worse than that. When you arrive at your level of incompetence, you're incompetent.
Right.
And all sorts of problems happen when you're incompetent. So integrating everybody into a new job every time, compresses that curve. Your incompetence will be less impactful.
There are some just great words of wisdom there that I think so many organizations just get wrong, and I think you just hit the nail on the head there in terms of integration. They just don't integrate new hires appropriately, and that's just down to poor leadership, and it's everywhere. It's a disease. If you look at it from the perspective of corporations and how they're set up, it is a disease within corporations. They just don't get it. They just don't.
Onboarding programs, Dylan, are very prolific right now, but they're not tailored for executive level. Executives need to be integrated. Onboarding needs to happen. Everybody needs to be onboarded.
It's two different things,
But
right?
that's
It's two different
integration.
things. They're two different things. Well, onboarding someone is just a process. Integrating somebody is a whole different navigation.
Well, especially at the senior leadership levels, it's critical. It's just critical.
So, Michael, listen, this has been a masterclass in leadership. Without the fluff, thank you so much for sharing so openly your wisdom. It's been fascinating. So for everyone listening, if this conversation made you reflect on how you lead or how you hire or how you show up, then it's done its job. Michael, where can people find more out about you, about your book? Where can they connect with you? Let us know.
Well, the book is on Amazon, so you can, that's the quickest way to get it, and you can get it just about anywhere in the world, and people do. The best place to find me is now through my executive search work at a company called Sheer Velocity. My email address is mburroughs, Burroughs, at sheervelocity.com. Email me, I check it all the time. And my LinkedIn page, Michael Burroughs, that's another way to get through to me, is through LinkedIn.
And what's the name of the book?
Before Onboarding, How to Integrate New Leaders for Quick and Sustained Results.
Available on Amazon.
Since 2011.
That's fantastic. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all the very best with your book and into 2026.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, Dylan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir. Take
Goodbye.
care.